Hi everyone, Leo here, and with this video I would like to share with you the final wrap-up of what has become a real series on this channel, Real Soldano SLO100 versus modelers and plugins. In the past month I have compared my real SLO100 with 6 different units: the Line 6 Helix Stadium, the Neural DSP SLO100 plugin, the 2-Note Genome 2, the Fractal AM4, the Hot-on Ampero2 stage and the Quad Cortex. If you missed those videos, you can find all of them in the description below. Today we put everything together. First, I will recap the methodology I used in all the comparisons, then we will listen again to every unit against the real amp with different riffs, starting from the settings I dialed in the dedicated videos. Finally, I will crown the winner and, very important, I will also explain the criteria I used to decide which one is the best, so that you can also make your own ranking based on what matters most to you. Let's start! Let me quickly recap the methodology. First, the channel. In all the videos I use the normal channel of the SLO with the crunch switch activated, as I think it is the most dynamic channel in the amp and therefore the most keen to be compared to modelers. High gain tends to hide the differences, the crunch channel exposes them. Second, the signal chain. The real SLO goes into my third reactive load and from there straight into my audio interface. The modelers go from their analog out straight into the same audio interface and the plugin runs directly in the DAW. No cabinet, no microphones, no room. Third, the IR. For both the real amp and every simulation I use the exact same IR of a greenback speaker loaded in my DAW outside the plugins and modelers. This removes the cabinet and microphone variables completely, so what we are really comparing is the amp versus the amp simulations. Fourth, the reactive load. During the series, some of you raised the doubt that the third reactive load was coloring the tone of the real amp. Well, the comparison with the Neural DSP plugin and later with the Fractal confirm that the third is pretty transparent. With those units I was able to get really close with a few tweaks, which would have been impossible if the reactive load was messing with the tone. Fifth, the impedance curve. With the Fractal AM4 I was able to play with the impedance curve, and what I learned is that yes, it matters, but it changes nuances, how we feel the amp. It does not justify drastic tonal differences. Also worth remembering that the impedance curve of my third reactive load is the one of a 4x12 greenback cabinet, which is typically also the one used in the SLO100 simulations, and is the one that I used inside the plugin as an IR. Sixth, the amp versions. Not every simulation models the same SLO100. My amp is the 2020 edition with the depth knob. The Fractal and most probably the Ampero model a pre-2020 version without the depth knob. The Stadium is a curious case. The photo of the amp inside the unit recalls the 2020 SLO100 as it shows the depth knob, but many of you pointed out that it should be the previous version, so the photo is probably simply wrong, or at least misleading. Keep this in mind because, as we learn in the Fractal video, the depth knob is kind of magic in the bass frequencies. Seventh, the input level. For every modeler and plugin I kept the default settings in terms of input volume and input gain. No input trimming, no level boosting at the front, so that all the units are exactly in the same positions and nobody gets an unfair advantage from a hotter input or from external EQ. And finally, the starting point. In every comparison I always started by setting the knobs of the simulation exactly like the knobs of my real SLO100, and then I tweaked from there to close the gap. And this starting point is actually the foundation of my ranking methodology, as we will see later on. Now, the part you were waiting for. Let's listen to all the units against the real SLO100. For each unit I will start from the final settings of the dedicated video, so the more close to the real amp. Before telling you the winner, let me explain the methodology I used to rank the units. Criterion number 1, tone accuracy, or how I like to call it, the tweak distance. The idea is simple. I set the knobs of the simulation exactly like the knobs of my real SLO100. If the simulation sounds like the real amp, already like this, or with few small tweaks, the simulation is accurate. The more drastic the tweaks I need to reach the tone of the real deal, the less accurate the simulation is. Criterion number 2, the price, because at the end, getting 95% of the tone from 120 euros is a very different story than getting it for more than 2000 euros. Criterion number 3, tweakability. How much parameters the unit offers beyond the standard amp controls. Tube types, sag, bias, impedance curve parameters, and so on. More parameters means more chances to close the gap with the real amp, and more fun for the nerd amp tweakers like me. But be careful, needing those parameters just to reach the bass tone is a minus. Having them available to go beyond is a plus. Criterion number 4, artifacts and consistency. Some units produce strange behaviors or artifacts, others stay clean and predictable. And then the use case. A plugin lives in the DAW, perfect for recording, a floor unit goes on stage, and this is not really fair to compare them one to the other. And this is why at the end I will give you a winner per category, other than the overall winner. And now the results. And to make things more interesting, I will build the final chart together with you while we go through the units. Let me first show you the empty chart and explain how it works. On the horizontal axis we have the tone accuracy, based on the tweak distance. The farther right, the closer the unit gets to the real SLO100 with fewer and smaller tweaks, starting from the same knob position, and the default input levels. On the vertical axis we have the value for money. The higher, the less you pay for what you get, and the size of each bubble represents the tweakability, so the amount of deep parameters the unit offers. This means that the best option is the one that will end up in the top right corner of the chart. Let's go! The Line 6 Helix Stadium is unfortunately the most disappointing of the series. I had to tweak really hard, reducing a lot the treble, adding a lot of bass, using the hype knob, and still the tone was not as enjoyable and musical as the real deal. The hype knob has a behavior that it is similar to the depth knob, but it is not enough. And here another detail. The photo of the amp in the stadium shows the depth knob, so it recalls the 2020 SLO, but the simulation itself seems to behave like the previous version. So the photo is probably simply wrong. Anyway, even considering that the model amp may be a pre-2020 version, the differences I experienced were really too much. Considering that we are talking about a unit of around 2,300 euros, well, I still think that Line 6 needs to raise the bar with their SLO100 simulation. And of course, this does not mean we can't get great tones from the Stadium in general. We absolutely can. It is specifically the SLO100 simulation that needs work. The Neural DSP SLO100 plugin really nailed the tone of the real Soldano. Few tweaks, no drastic changes, and I was very close to the real deal, considering that it is a plugin dedicated specifically to the SLO100. This is what I expected, and it delivered. This comparison was also fundamental for the methodology, as it confirmed the transparency of the MySir reactive load. The two notes Genome 2 provides very similar result to the Neural DSP plugin, just with some more tweaks needed, and this is totally understandable considering that Genome 2 is a generic amp simulation suite covering tons of amps, where the Neural DSP plugin is specifically dedicated to the SLO100. For the price, an impressive result. With the Fractal AM4, the story was interesting. The initial difference was drastic, especially in the bass frequency, and the standard tone controls were not enough. It was the discovery of the depth knob in the advanced parameters that put me in the right direction, and from there I was able to get very close to the real deal. and this is the beauty of Fractal. With around 60 more parameters plus the impedance curve controls like low freq, low ratio and low Q, it is very hard not to be able to get where you wanna go. Fractal is confirmed as the paradise of nerd amp tweaker. The flip side, you need to know what you are doing and you need time. And then Neural DSP Quad Cortex. It was very convincing. I had to do a bit more tweaks compared to the plugins, but I was able to nail pretty easily the tone of my SLO 100. Of course, it is much pricier compared to the Ampero2 and way more expensive than the plugins, but the results are really convincing. The hot tone Ampero2 stage is the surprise of the series. I was able to nail the tone of my real SLO 100 with the less expensive hardware unit of the whole comparison, which is quite remarkable. Yes, I had to tweak quite a lot, but I didn't notice artifacts or annoying things like I noticed in the Stadium. In terms of tweakability, it sits in the middle between the Quad Cortex, having also the preamp and power amp tube simulation, but with less parameters than the Stadium, and of course way less than Fractal. And here it is, the complete picture. As you can see, the Neural DSP plugin and the Genome 2 dominate the top right area. The Ampero2 is the best position hardware unit. The Fractal is pretty accurate, but you pay for it, even if you also get that huge bubble of tweakability. And the Stadium unfortunately sits alone in the bottom left. So who is the winner? Overall winner, the Neural DSP SLO 100 plugin. It is the closest to the real amp with the fewest tweaks, and it costs around 120 euros. If your SLO 100 tone lives in the dough, this is a no-brainer. Best hardware modeler? I would say hot tone Ampero2. Nailing the tone of a real SLO with the cheapest hardware unit of the comparison is simply remarkable. If you need the SLO 100 tone on a stage without spending a fortune, this is my pick. Best of the nerd amp tweakers, the Fractal AM4. If you love to go deep, tweak the impedance curve, the tubes, everything, and you want a platform that can virtually reach any tone you have in your mind, Fractal remains the paradise. Best generic suite, the 2-notch Genome 2. Almost the accuracy of the dedicated plugin with a whole world of other amp included. And the Stadium, for now, regarding the SLO 100 simulation specifically, my advice is to wait for the firmware updates. I really hope that Line 6 will refine this simulation, and if they do, I will be happy to redo the comparison and update this ranking. Please let me know in the comment section below your opinions, which criteria matter most to you, and if there are other units you would like me to compare with the real SLO 100 in the future. And please don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell, as it would really help me to create more content like this. Thank you so much for watching and see you soon. Bye bye.